Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Vetre, and this week we are going to be covering the super duper exciting Bahrain Grand Prix. All right, yeah, obviously I'm being sarcastic. That race was everything we expected it to be. For those keeping track at home, that's Max Verstappen by a whopping 22 seconds. He was ahead of the field and probably on his way to Jeddah before the race was even over. So let's get that one out of the way. The biggest takeaway for me from this race was I need to level set my expectations for the remainder of the season. Now, Formula One is convinced that the regulations have tightened up the field, and that is true. The regulations have tightened up the field for everybody after Max Verstappen. So do with that what you will, just my opinion. But in any case, so I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. Max Verstappen won. Max Verstappen won by 22 seconds, and that's honestly only because he had to pit. For those keeping track at home, he won last year by 12 seconds. This year, he won by 22 seconds. Again, do with that what you will. But yeah, if this is how it's going to be, then Red Bull is off to another unprecedented start. And frankly, after this race, it feels like they're going to win all 24 of the races, barring a catastrophe, barring George Russell dive bombing him, barring whatever Mercedes concept that Red Bull took and made better, failing on them and all this. Yeah, it didn't matter. So Verstappen wins, Checo second, Carlos Sainz third. Awesome. But this week it felt like the drama or the excitement in F1 was off the track versus on the track. For those of you keeping track at home, just a whole lot of novela-esque behavior happening at Red Bull, starting with, of course, the top man, Christian Horner, who was accused of inappropriate behavior towards a female employee, specifically his assistant. Red Bull did an investigation. Again, I'm only repeating stuff that most of you already know. Red Bull did an investigation, an independent investigation, and came away with it saying, hey, he's fine. He's fine. He's been cleared, blah, blah, blah. Somebody somewhere disagreed with the findings of that investigation because guess what? They released all of the evidence, or at least 100 pages worth of evidence, a document, a Google Drive link that basically exposed all the WhatsApp messages that Christian Horner was sending to this employee. Now, I'm not here to verify the claims. More than likely, it's true. That's my personal opinion. But if anything, it shows that definitely an abuse of power, definitely something that would traumatize the victim. Of course, the downside of this document being released is that the victim's identity is now out in the public, and of course people are going to make of it what you will. Now there's essentially two camps: those of you who believe, hey, what's the big idea, she was flirting back with him, this is crazy, blah 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 blah, and those who say clearly showing an abuse of power and clearly showing that, yes, this was warranted. Yes, she should have definitely brought charges. Yes, Christian Horner is creepy. I fall in the camp of Christian Horner. What the F are you doing? Still don't know why he is the technical or the team principal for Red Bull. Yeah, no one man should have all that power. And frankly, my heart goes out to the victim and the trauma that she's going through that now is living out or being played out in open court. So yeah, I'm in the camp. Christian Horner is definitely guilty. Christian Horner shouldn't have a job as a team principal. It's my podcast, so obviously I can say whatever I want. But hey, hopefully most people like what I just said. But in any case, that became a bigger thing. Now, I have always believed that it is a power struggle between Horner, El Doctor Muerte, a.k.a. Dr. Helmut Marko, and Jos Verstappen. Now, the reason I believe that is that if you pay attention, a lot of these reports that were being released from the press first started with Dutch media sources. And of course, they eventually would make their way to English-speaking media, Spanish-speaking medias. It doesn't matter. In any case, it all started with the Dutch publications. Now, what is interesting, admittedly, this has been super messy. I honestly don't really know why Horner still had a job. Seems like it was to the detriment of the team. Now, at the time of this recording, as I'm recording this podcast, new reports have come out. A couple of them sensational, some of them believable, whatever. But here are some things that have happened since then related to Red Bull. Jos Verstappen came out and basically said, hey, as long as Christian Horner is the team principal, it's not good. He needs to leave because he's playing the victim, and instead he is the one that is causing all of the issues. Really bold of Jos Verstappen to say that, considering all the stuff he's done in the past. I'm not going to tell y'all. You look it up. That's not opinion. That's actually fact. Also strikes me as somebody who perhaps is living vicariously through his extremely talented, once-in-a-generation talented son. But that's okay. Anyways, so Jos comes out against Horner. Now we find out that there's also a clause in Max Verstappen's contract that says as long as Helmut Marko is there, he'll probably stay, and that's not the clause. But essentially, if Helmut Marko leaves, Max Verstappen is also free to leave. And so, of course, if you're watching any images or anything from the paddock this past weekend, you saw the infamous image of Toto Wolff having a conversation with Jos Verstappen. And so now that has started a bunch of rumors of, could Max Verstappen end up with Mercedes in 2025? Now, for me personally, wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. For starters, Verstappen has, at least it wouldn't make a lot of sense before the 2026 season and new regulations. For starters, Verstappen has the fastest car. The team is basically his. He's got a second driver who's not really challenging, or a teammate who's not really challenging him for race wins. Checo's super talented, but the facts are the facts. Why would he give that up and go to Mercedes, where now he is having to race with George Russell as his teammate in a car that's unproven, with a track record for a team that, although they won 8 consecutive Constructors Championships, the last 2.5 years have just really been monumental disasters over at Mercedes. So again, I ask, is Max Verstappen really going to go to Mercedes, or again, is this just Helmut Marko, who, by the way, also said, I'm not going to get in the way of Max Verstappen leaving to go to Mercedes? So again, just do with that what you will. Yeah, love that for everybody. I will also go on record and say that if Max Verstappen does end up joining Mercedes, count me in the camp of those who would be super interested in that happening. I would just love to see George Russell, who had essentially waited 2 years to become the leader he says he is, and Max Verstappen, who is the leader of a team, who is miles ahead of him in terms of racecraft. And now for those two to potentially be teammates is just, you could not write that any better. And so, yeah, again, at the time of this recording, this is all that's happening in the Verstappen camp. Again, the biggest thing that's shocking to me is that it feels like Helmut Marko, Jos Verstappen, and I'm not even going to say Max Verstappen. So Jos and Helmut are essentially calling Red Bull's bluff. They'll say, we will get Max out of Red Bull. There goes your World Driver Championship. There goes your sponsorship money. And there goes the quote-unquote face of F1. Debatable for me, but whatever. And they're calling the bluff of Red Bull to say, hey, you can keep Horner and we're gone, or you can fire Horner and we'll stay. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I personally feel like in my heart of hearts, everything's going to work its way out. And Verstappen will be at Red Bull, Helmut Marko will be at Red Bull, and Christian Horner will still be at Red Bull. Call me in the camp of surprise if anything actually comes of this. Again, Horner, in my opinion, shouldn't have a job. And if that doesn't really vibe with you, then hey, I don't know. Hey, anyways. All right. But We're not talking about Red Bull drama. We are talking about the Bahrain GP. So all that aside, that's Red Bull at the top in the Constructors' Championship, at the top in the World Driver Championship with Verstappen, followed by Checo. That's great. And we are off to essentially a repeat of last year where everyone was super hyped for life when Carlos Sainz ended up winning Singapore because Red Bull had some setup issues. And then essentially hoping that something would happen to Max's car so we would get another winner. It is what it is. Now, if you're a Red Bulls fan or a Red Bull fan, congratulations to you. And I definitely understand having a team that's winning. It probably feels like what it was like to be a Mercedes fan prior to all of this, or a Ferrari fan, literally in any moment in history when they were winning a bunch of championships, right? So yeah, if people have a problem with Red Bull winning, and I say this with my whole chest, 10 toes down, if people have a problem with Red Bull winning, then they should do something about it. Or at least they're trying, right? But there's a, you know what? Doesn't matter. Right. So moving on to the next thing. So yeah, now's a good as any of a time to talk about Mercedes. Mercedes, it's very interesting. Obviously, prior to the season starting and before testing even started, the news broke that, hey, Lewis Hamilton is going to be joining Ferrari in 2025. That set off a chain of events that started the silly season super early, which, by the way, silly season? Is there? I don't know. Anyways, I'm not even going to touch that. Anyways, and so that kind of set off a chain of events of drivers reaching out to Mercedes. Hey, I would like to fill that seat. Mick Schumacher, probably not going to get it. Esteban Ocon, of course, he's got ties to Mercedes, auditioning. Fernando Alonso, at father, obviously throwing his hat in the ring. I'm sure he would love to get on a team that's even better than Aston Martin. And he's been coy about it, by the way. Fernando is as loyal to any team as... I don't know. Yeah, nope, not going to touch that. Anyways, Fernando has thrown his hat in for driver for Mercedes. That's one. Obviously, Max Verstappen is now being linked to it. So yeah, all the drivers reaching out to Toto and Mercedes to say, hey, I want to be in this team. But of course, Toto, whose story keeps changing, by the way, is saying that, hey, we had to let Lewis go. We had to let Lewis go because we are wanting to make sure that there's a seat for Kimi Antonelli. Great. That makes sense. A little weird because the story keeps changing. Also puts a ton of pressure on a 17-year-old kid who apparently is supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know. In this environment and the current F1 environment, I feel like it was undue pressure. Hopefully Kimi continues to exceed expectations, and who knows, he's in F2 now. Maybe he'll be ready for a seat next year. And if he is, Toto Wolff is going to look like a genius. If he's not, people are going to continue questioning, as they are right now, hey, you had the potentially statistically greatest driver of all time on your team who's been loyal to this team, and you let him go. You fumbled it. Right? And of course people are going to say it. Now, that being said, I will say that I'm always for drivers who go after what they want to get and put their interest first over the interest of the team, because guess what? The teams are not going to care about you when somebody faster and better and shinier comes out. So, full circle. I'm bringing this up because this weekend at the Bahrain GP, Lewis Hamilton was in his, I'm going to call it his 2-week notice era, his menace era. And so for those of you who are not familiar, in the United States, we have this concept of turning in your notice or turning in your 2 weeks notice. And usually most people will turn in their notice when they already have a job lined up and they're just doing the courteous thing, like, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm out. Get your house in order. Now, me, I probably wouldn't do a 2-week notice, or maybe I would. Anyways, and so when you're in that 2-week notice era, you don't care, because what happens to your current employment or place of employment and your job doesn't affect you. They can fire you if they want to, but you got a job lined up, and then they got to prove why they got to fire you, right? So it's a little bit weird. And so what we saw this weekend at Bahrain was a very relaxed and a very happy, chill Lewis Hamilton. Hey, was the car fast? Hey, I don't know. It was reliable. Hey, Lewis, how do you feel about your qualifying? Oh, man, yeah, I sacrificed one lap pace for race pace, and, I just did not do a good job of my qualifying, and, sometimes you just have sucky laps. Literal paraphrase quotes of Lewis Hamilton, or from Lewis Hamilton from this past weekend. So, very chill. My favorite moment, honestly, of Lewis Hamilton this week was during the driver's parade when Lawrence went and interviewed him and said, "Hey, Lewis, how you feeling about the race?" Lewis said, hey, man, let me bring you up on something. Why'd you rate me so low on the drivers for this year? And completely caught the reporter off guard. I'm sure his facial expression must have been hilarious, because then Lewis had to hit him with, I'm just messing with you. Like, I don't know. He's in his 100% menace era. I am here for it. And yeah, definitely a different side of Lewis Hamilton. Still the professional that he is, still the talent that he is, but just, hey, the car is what it is. Not going to be my problem next year. And clearly he's making the right choice. I mean, unless hopefully something happens to have that car improving, but let's see. During the race, Lewis was having a bunch of issues with his car. One, the battery would not charge, so he was unable to access that for a little bit. It was at 1%. Eventually, that would get fixed. Then at some point during the race, his seat cracked, and so he was basically racing for the bulk of the race, or the entirety of the race, with one butt cheek just chilling, and the other one in a seat. So yeah, Mercedes gave him a super reliable car. We don't know yet if it's fast. Apparently, based on strategy and because they had to do some things to the setup of the car, that would eventually cause some overheating issues with the power unit that they had to nurse. The car was losing around 0.6 a lap. Okay, so if they get everything right and they get everything in the setup window, are we saying, and I think projections are saying that this is the case, but are we saying that Mercedes is as fast as or faster than Ferrari and closer to Red Bull than what we saw this weekend? Yeah. And by the way, that strategy, I'll look up the technical term. Don't blaze me if you're an old school Formula One fan. All right. We got to be inclusive, y'all. Got to be inclusive. What I don't understand is the strategy from Mercedes. They've been running this set up one way, and then the last minute they decided, hey, we're going to close up these engine covers because it's going to be cold. I don't really understand. They had one practice that, of course, was at night. So they knew that it was going to be cooler. So, yeah, I don't know. And I guess they knew that it was going to be cooler was the reason for them to shut it. It doesn't matter. It caused them some issues, which would compromise George Russell's race, which would compromise Lewis Hamilton's race. Of course, Lewis Hamilton was dealing with some qualifying issues that have persisted during this generation of Mercedes cars, starting back with the W13, W14, and hopefully not the W15, but also, who knows? Again, after this year, Lewis is not going to care. But I'm going to love this iteration of Lewis Hamilton, just completely unbothered, completely like, it is what it is. Now, for George Russell, the strategy didn't really pay off. Now, Russell would later go on to say that his setup and Lewis's setup were not that much different. Okay, do with that what you will. But although he started the race in third, he would eventually finish on fifth. Now, he finished P5 because he was essentially managing, again, that power unit issue based on that setup that they did last minute, which was causing his car to overheat. So, again, it is also estimated, like I said, that they are losing about 0.6 a lap in time. Toto Wolff will later go on to say that, hey, we kind of felt like this race was a wash anyways. My words, not Toto's. And so we'll see. The car is really great. It's reliable. And so we are going to see what happens. We're definitely faster than what it is. And a lot of people do believe that they are faster. The setup stuff, super baffling. So, yeah, there's that. The second thing, I guess, that I'm kind of curious about with Mercedes is what is going to be their strategy moving forward with these two drivers? So obviously they want George to be the de facto leader. They are pushing him because he's going to be their guy for this year and next year, and probably sign him to a new contract. But has George really done anything to prove that he is that guy? I know what you're going to say. He's the only one who's gotten a victory for Mercedes in the last 2 years. He got one. That's great. But it is telling that if it is in fact that they follow the preferences of one driver, and that one driver being George Russell, I wouldn't say that the vehicle was super successful and that it was great campaigns for them. Now, this year the car was made to suit Lewis Hamilton's preferences, and so we shall see. I will say it is the first year in 2 years, so this being the third year, where what they are seeing in the sims correlates to what they're seeing on track. It's also the first year that in a while that the drivers are really happy with at least how the car feels. And Lewis Hamilton, of course, himself saying this finally feels like a race car. So my man was in the trenches for the last 2 years with whatever tractors they gave him. So, yeah, as far as Bahrain goes, obviously Russell finishes P5, Lewis Hamilton finishes P7, Russell down 2 spots, Lewis up 2 spots. It doesn't matter. It's not a podium for either of them. Is a W15 a good car? Hopefully it is a better car than what we saw at Bahrain. Yeah. Otherwise, this year will be a wash, and the W15 is not going to be great. And they essentially will have one more year under these current regulations to get a competitive car. So we'll see. But I think many fans are hoping, again, that someone besides Red Bull wins. And many of those fans are hoping that it's Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton and George Russell to win. Now, other teams that were doing pretty good, obviously McLaren, I wouldn't say really surprising, but definitely started this year off a lot better than they started last year. I would say Lando Norris probably had a stronger race than Oscar Piastri. By the way, I still really like Oscar Piastri. Just a quiet, nonchalant, semi-sarcastic kid going on about his business. It'll be interesting to see which one of those guys gets a race win first. Now, some would argue that Oscar Piastri already got a race win in Formula One if you count sprints. They give points for sprints. A win is a win. I think he's already gotten one. There are those who say no, sprints don't count, so they're both winless. Okay, whatever. In any case, I expect a lot from McLaren going into this season. They certainly had a strong race. Again, way better than last year. I think that barring some mistakes from Lando Norris, for sure, he would have been up higher in the order. He just could not put his qualifying laps together, but it's okay. They qualified in an order and fought their way through the field. Lando obviously would end up finishing in 6th. Oscar would end up finishing in 8th. So kudos to them. Now, McLaren is definitely one of those teams that, based on their performance last year, people are also expecting a lot from them. So you're starting to see a theme for me, right? Remember earlier in the show, I said Red Bull's at the top and the field is bunched up after Red Bull. If you look at the qualifying times from pole all the way down to 10th, it was less than a second, right? That's great. However, as these races have come to fruition, you see that the reality is a little bit different. And he, being Max Verstappen, is a metronome. He's a watch. He consistently puts in lap after lap after lap. And so what that means is, although the field is bunched up, it doesn't necessarily apply to him. So everybody from Ferrari on down to probably Aston Martin, close. But Red Bull, Max Verstappen's Red Bull, is head and shoulders above everybody. So TBD on what's going to happen. Teams that were surprising again, Aston had a strong showing. Lance at one point was in P20, ended up coming into the points at P10. Fernando Alonso was able to finish on the points as well. He's another guy that put a qualifying lap together that even he was surprised by, but it's okay. It's to be expected of someone of his pedigree. Right, you give Fernando Alonso a car that can actually compete, and even one that maybe is not that great. Looking at you, Alpine, in the third stint that he had with them, Yeah. So we'll see. Alonso is also, again, like I mentioned earlier, somebody who's being linked to other teams, specifically Mercedes. He's being super, super coy. Now, if it was me, I would tread carefully when dealing with Lawrence Stroll. Now, if you have seen clips of Lawrence Stroll, he's this doting father, really great. He kind of looks like a mob boss. Kind of looks like somebody you wouldn't want to cross. But yeah, that is just my opinion. In any case, Aston had a good showing. McLaren had a good showing. Mercedes could have done better with strategy. Ferrari could have done better with just the setup of their cars. All of these top teams kind of hurt themselves, while Checo had to fight for his life to eventually get to second place. He didn't have to fight for his life. I'm just a joke. All right, relax. Red Bull at the top, and then everybody fighting amongst themselves underneath them. So that's it for the top teams. Now, what I want to talk about is something that happened towards the end of the race with VCarb, which I'm calling them VCarb or Visa Cash App, RB, Visa Cash App, Running Bulls, Racing Bulls, whatever they're, I don't know, VCarb. If whoever knows what this team is actually called, can we officially call them the Racing Bulls? Can somebody, yeah, because VCarb, that sounds like something I would see in a physical at my doctor's office. Yeah, your VCarb levels are, okay, that's a bad joke. My bad. Anyway, so something happened at the end of the race between Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda and team orders. Now, Ricciardo was behind Tsunoda. The team swapped them towards the end of the race because Ricciardo, I'm assuming, thought he had better pace and was faster than Yuki Tsunoda. The problem, of course, is that Ricciardo was told, or Yuki Tsunoda was told, to switch places with Ricciardo. Tsunoda obviously pissed. Cue the clip of Yuki cussing somebody else out or yelling on the radio, because that's what they love to do with Yuki. Whatever. Anyways, and so Yuki is told to swap. He swaps. Ricciardo, that pace never materialized, and he was never able to pass the Haas. But instead of giving the position back to Tsunoda, by the way, they were not in the points. Neither of them were going to score. The honorable thing to do would have been to switch back, if anything, for a moral victory. Because, again, no points given. They were both out of the points. All right? So I think this is the principle of the thing. It was just really weird. It didn't pan out. And, of course, during the cool down lap, Yuki does something fairly reckless, almost causes issues. I get being mad. I don't really know why it happened. Of course, Ricciardo, I wouldn't say had some choice words for Yuki, but he definitely made him out to be like he was some kind of idiot. Anyways, it's weird. Now, what is kind of troubling to me is how Yuki Tsunoda is being portrayed. Right? I think that you get Yuki's emotions, and he's pretty raw, and he's yelling, and he's always telling people to shut up, and he's always cussing them out. What most people don't realize is that all these drivers are doing all of this to whoever their race engineers are, right? It's just that Yuki, for whatever reason, is adding entertainment to it, whatever. But I don't like how they portray him. I really can't put my finger on it, but it makes it seem like he is not in total control of his emotions. I would argue that he is just unfiltered with his emotions. I would argue that a lot of these drivers are also similar to Yuki. They're just better at the PR game, right? And if you doubt me, go back and look at clips of Max going at it with GP. They did that a bunch last year. Look at, Daniel Ricciardo himself telling people to be quiet. Lando Norris, right? A lot of these drivers are the same way with their engineers. It just feels like they're a little bit more conscious about like, I don't want to feel like a jerk. I don't want to be portrayed as a jerk. Again, just, yeah. So it was a little weird. The whole strategy didn't pan out. It caused some issues. So it'll be interesting to see like what happens as the year pans out. Because those two are essentially fighting for the second seat at Red Bull. Now, there may be 2 seats available at Red Bull. I don't actually know. But it feels like it's a foregone conclusion that Checo Perez, unfortunately, is going to lose his seat at Red Bull. I'm not sure why, because I don't feel like Tsunoda or Ricciardo at this juncture are better than Checo Perez. Now, if you want to say that Ricciardo is more popular, okay, you probably see him a lot on Drive to Survive, and you probably see him a lot on ESPN. But in terms of marketability, Checo Perez is probably one of the most popular drivers on this side of the world. If you look at North America, Central and South America, Checo Perez is bringing in a ton of money for Red Bull, and he can be a really consistent driver. So anyways, we're not talking about Checo. We're talking about VCARB. I, again, don't understand the strategy. I don't understand how it panned out. Somebody better than me should explain that to me, because, again, they were not on points. Ricciardo did not actually pass the Haas, and then Yuki turns out to look like some crazy emotionless. I don't know. They didn't have to do Yuki like that. They didn't have to do Yukita like that. Anyways, and so we'll see. In any case, I do feel like it was valid for Yuki to be pissed about how all of that panned out. And again, it's a gentleman's agreement. Like, no one says you have to give the position back. You just do it because we are teammates, and I wasn't able to do the thing that I said I could do. Here you go. Take it back. So, yeah. But even that was way, 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 way better. And what I mean, that VCARB situation was way better than whatever the F is going on in Alpine. Now, a lot of people had predicted that Alpine would have the worst car this season, that it was too heavy. The team didn't understand it aerodynamically, and that played out to a T. Again, at the time of this recording, you had their chief engineer and their top aero guy leave the team. Ocon and Gasly probably on LinkedIn polishing up the old CV, trying to get on a different team because Alpine ain't it. And that's what I am trying to understand, is how Alpine, formerly Renault, currently Renault, whatever, one of the teams who manufactures their own engine, right? They used to provide engines for Red Bull, by the way, has fallen so much. Whatever, like, they fired Otmar Safnauer for whatever reason, and now it's just panning out to be terrible. Just terrible. So yeah, they qualified last. Shocker. I at least thought that they would be faster than the Haas, which, sorry, Haas. My apologies to you. Nico, K-Mag, lo siento. And I thought that they would probably be better than the Williams. And so that goes to show you, while other teams were improving, Alpine took a step backward. It probably explains why Dugan, Ocon, and Gasly had those, like, yo no fui faces during the livery reveal back in February. It was a little bit weird. They did not have a DNF, which, cool, great, but although they were able to improve their positions, it wasn't anything to write home about. The team, I would say, is in shambles. It's in shambles because the car is terrible, and now they basically got to upgrade it and build it for the rest of the season to potentially end up finishing, I predict them P6, P7 in the Constructors' Championship. I don't know. But this should not be happening to a team with the storied history that Alpine, formerly Renault, have. So they should get their house in order. Obviously, their drivers are probably looking out for other teams. I'm assuming Ocon is trying to figure out how to get to Mercedes. I'm assuming that that's probably not going to happen. So, yeah, it was just not a great weekend for Alpine. It is panning out to not be a great year for Alpine. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, let's see. Again, the race itself there weren't a lot of overtakes, or maybe there were. It was pretty cut and dry. One person who unfortunately continues to have bad luck is Valtteri Bottas, who again was the recipient of a super long pit stop. Obviously, we know that Valtteri has the record for the longest pit stop, but this race he was the victim of a 54-second pit stop. Holy crap. Dang. Anyways, and so I feel bad for Valtteri. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't expect Stake F1 Kick Sauber team, or is it Kick Sauber? Is it Sauber? You don't expect Sauber to be struggling this much. At the very least, I expected them to be at the same level as Williams, higher than Williams, maybe at the same level as Haas, however you rank those three teams. But in that vicinity, the race did not pan out well for them. Now, on the topic of Haas, my apologies again to Nico Hulkenberg, who he has the pedigree. Sure, he is the longest streak of driver with no podium. Terrible, terrible record to have. But he is a talented driver. There's a reason why he's still in Formula One. And Haas seems to have figured out race pace and tire degradation this year. So again, apologies to them from me for making fun of them, because they said that during testing they were going to be figuring out tires. And I said, Jesus, Haas, you still don't know your tire? Anyways, nobody blames me. All right. And so it was that. But yeah, Haas did really well. Williams was struggling. So as some of you know, Williams they got new steering wheels, and the way their old steering wheels were, the display of the steering wheel was actually on the car and not on the steering wheel. This year, they got a new fangled steering wheel. Great. James Vaughn continues to try and bring this team into the modern era, try to bring the glory days for Williams back. But at some point, Logan Sargent had an issue with his car, and he lost control. And of course, when I was watching the race, I was like, Logie Bear, Captain America, Sarasota's finest. You can't keep making these mistakes. But apologies to Logan, because replay would show that it wasn't something that Logan Sargent did. His steering wheel was acting up. It changed his brake differential. All of this stuff was happening to the steering wheel, and he didn't do anything. Of course, we all know that the drivers control the different settings on their car via the steering wheel, but there's nothing you can do if the steering wheel is changing the settings by itself, right? So caused a bunch of issues with the car. The car itself was overheating, and the only reason I know that was because Alex Albon got a message on his new steering wheel that literally said across the bottom in a red banner, "Car hot, car hot, car hot." And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm still high on Williams. I'm still high on James Vaughn. I'm not taking this race as an indicator of like what's to come this year. I do think that they will continue to improve. I do think that they will actually finish this year higher than Haas, this year higher than Alpine. Call me crazy. Yeah, we'll come back for sure. Out of the midfield teams, they are at the top of the midfield, my opinion. But again, it's probably because I'm really high on James Vaughn. So yeah, that was the race as it is. Now, I'm gonna do a couple of housekeeping items. No, not housekeeping items. I'm gonna talk about some things not related to Bahrain, but related to F1. I feel like right now it's a bit of a soap opera with everything that's going on. Now, it's great. It adds to the excitement. Every sport has its drama, but this has gotten a little bit I don't know. It's gotten a little bit crazy. I don't understand, again, how Horner still has a job. I don't understand how essentially Red Bull is getting bullied by this man, whether or not he had backers, which, by the way, oh yeah, at the time of this recording, there's reports that allegedly Horner tried to secretly buy this team with a group of British investors. Yeah, I don't know. But I don't understand how he still has a job. Additionally to that, we know that Mohammed bin Sulayman, I don't know how to say his name properly, but the president of the FIA allegedly went to Max Verstappen and asked him to publicly back Christian Horner. This man knows no shame, I guess. And again, further reports, he's being investigated now because he tried to alter the results of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in 2023, which saw Alonso lose a podium after he got a 10-second penalty and then get the podium back. And so allegedly, the reason he's being investigated is because he himself tried to alter the results of that race. I don't know. It feels weird. I think he's probably not super well liked, or maybe he is, but I think it's time for him to move on. I think it's time for Horner to move on. I feel like they are just hurting the sport. But I'm just one person with an opinion. Drop a comment. Tell me if you feel any differently. The other thing is that I feel a little bit weary about Joss acting like he makes the decisions for Max. Now, I know that they are super close. You can have whatever opinion you have about that relationship, but it's interesting. I think that it's Joss making all of these comments and not Max. Again, like, the whole situation is really messy, and what sucks and what's sad is that this all started with allegations against Horner. Then evidence was released, clearly painting Horner and what he did in a negative light. Cool. What's being forgotten in all of this is that they have bypassed the trauma that the victim went through, right? Everybody's like clearly like forgetting all of this for their own personal gain. We knew from last year that there was perhaps a power struggle within the Red Bull camp between Horner and Marco, and now come to find out it's the Verstappens and Marco versus Horner. It's just messy. I feel like they're ruining a great thing, and but I mean by that is that they have a winning formula for a team. They have the aero god Adrian Newey designing cars. They have once in a generational talent Max Verstappen. However you feel about Verstappen, he is a talented driver. Fastest car, best aerodynamicist, great driver. They could continue winning. They're about to blow it up because no one wants to fire Christian Horner. Do with that what you will. So yeah, that was my analysis of the Bahrain GP. Next up is Saudi Arabia. Again, the race is going to be on Saturday in observance of Ramadan. So that's awesome. I actually like having the races on a Saturday. Just frees up my whole weekend. That's all I got to say, because some of y'all are watching in a different time zone. I'm watching the United States, all right? That means all my races are in the morning. Anyways, but yeah, it was a race. Bahrain. It was a race. And so we'll see how Saudi Arabia is, but I hope y'all will tune in for the next race recap. That is it for this episode of the Monoplaza F1 podcast. Tell your mommies, your papis, your tios, your tias, like, comment, subscribe. As always, I'm Emi Bertre. Peace.